To do while I do my thing. Hey everybody, welcome. Today is Tuesday, October 5th. You are at the Kubernetes SIG Testing bi-weekly meeting. I am your host, Aaron of SIG Beard, aka Aaron Kirkenberger, aka SnipXP at all the places. We are going to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct during this meeting. And it is publicly recorded and will be posted to YouTube later. Kubernetes Code of Conduct basically means let's all be our very best selves to each other. If you have a problem with the conduct of this meeting, you're free to reach out to me privately, like I said, SnipXP at all the places, or you can reach out to conduct@kubernetes.io. Okay, so having said that, today's agenda is pretty light. I wanted to, let's see, regularly recurring topics. Welcome any new members or attendees. I feel like I know everybody here. It's nice to see you, Paris. I feel like we haven't seen you in a while.
I've been here hiding for the last two in the background.
Awesome. I also forgot to put this on the agenda, but I wanted to pause and take a moment to congratulate Cole and Alvaro for being the SIG's newest tech leads. So congratulations, guys. Well deserved. And then with that, I will hand it over to Cole to talk about replacing Basal in testing for us. Cole, I'm going to make you co-host in case you need to share your screen to talk about this.
Okay, let's see if I can do that. Okay. Here's the right tab.
Hey, there it is. We can see that. You are also muted, by the way, if you're talking right now. The button's hiding in like a little drop-down bar once you're sharing your screen.
There we go. It was sharing my computer's audio instead of my audio.
Ah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring this issue to everyone's attention. This is something that Chow has done kind of the prerequisite exploratory work for, but that we'd like to recruit more help on. So this is an effort to replace the Basal build system in the Kubernetes test info repo with not Basal. So primarily using make with whatever language specific build tools are appropriate for the each use case. Chow has kind of broken this up into some individual subtasks to make this a little more piecemeal and more approachable. But we'd really like some help to try to tackle some of these things and chip away at this. There's a number of things kind of motivating this. The most recent is a kind of a dependency issue that we were having with Basal and rules Kates and the GCP client that we'd like to use. We're working around that by copying and pasting for the time being, but that's obviously not a good way to be managing code. So we'd like to be kind of moving towards a better build system. And Basal's kind of been a pain point for us for a while. So yeah, we're looking for help there. Anybody has any thoughts or things to say about that? Interested in that as well. Chow, do you have anything to add?
I'm good. That's pretty much what we got. And actually, I would like to mention that copy pasting is not going to work because of the nested dependency. The only possible way to work around that is actually forking Google Cloud Build repo and the Gem Proto repo, and with a bunch of Go mod change to cheat on the system, and it's going to be very nasty. So this actually has become a blocker for the Google Cloud Build work.
Okay, that's very good to know.
That is good to know. Like, I'm super excited about this, but I also feel like I don't know how much time I have to super dedicate to it. But I'm definitely interested in helping out. I suppose one question I'm having is if this is blocking the Google Cloud build work, would it make sense to attempt to do that work in a separate repo? So for example, what happens if you extract prowl into its own repo and focus on that repo, not using Basal? Does that reduce your scope of work or unblock you any more quickly?
I think that's an increased scope, to be honest. Just breaking out prowl is not a piecemeal of work.
Okay. I didn't think it would be. I just thought I'd suggest it. I just sort of, there's a part of me that wonders if like how much stuff we have in the repo that truly needs to be migrated, or if it's worth sort of re-examining some of the stuff that we have Basal doing for us, and if we could just end up dropping it if we're not maintaining or using it. I think I'm thinking mostly of the TypeScript and some of the Python stuff here. Is TypeScript necessary for Dec?
It is.
Oh no. Okay. Then I think I've run out of ideas to scope this down. How can people help here?
So this comment right here, I also linked this in the meeting notes, but this issue is the tracking issue kind of for the bigger effort. All of these individual issues that Chow has broken this down into should make this a little more approachable, because these are kind of specific changes to, it's more specific things than just saying remove Basal. So this should be a little more approachable. Yeah, so if anybody thinks that they can tackle any of these individual things, that'd be very helpful.
Is it okay if we did some outreach? Oh, apologize, Aaron.
Well,
go ahead. You go first. You lead this meeting.
Okay, I think I was going to ask for maybe like, this is a challenge I have when I'm trying to scope stuff for other people to pick it up and run with it. I feel like somebody might need to see a little more step-by-step work here. For example, I noticed the way that Chow has been working on building and testing Go without Basal is to create a canary job that is run manually as a pre-submit, and continuing to just run that over and over until it works. So I would imagine that doing something like that for all of the other work would be necessary. And then maybe help sort of enumerating, I think you're enumerating the rules, which is good, but just sort of trying to figure out like what are all the things that need to be tested or could break or whatever. That's something I can try to help out with, but I feel like sort of like maybe pointing people at the way Chow is doing the Go stuff and trying to use that as the prototype for basically do this, but for a different language or a different set of rules or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that sounds like we should try to land one piece then pretty completely, so that we have a kind of example for the rest of these. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. It seems like the approach that Chow's using for Go works relatively well. I'm just like, as a new contributor, I think I'd have a tough time. I'm just, okay, so I'll get rid of TypeScript, the TypeScript stuff, but what actually has to happen? Like, how do I need to make sure that everything still looks okay? Since TypeScript is involved in deck, I need to make sure deck runs locally and it also works remotely. Do I need somebody's help in deploying a deck instance remotely? Yada, yada, yada. I think it's help clarifying like what levels of access and credentials and stuff do I need to really drive this stuff end to end. Just suggestions, because I know it's a lot.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for some of these, that is kind of a lot of what the work is determining, how far all these things need to be changed, I guess, and what things need to be changed. But yeah, I agree that we could definitely clarify that more, and kind of what we could be doing is definitely filling out more of the success constraints or whatever, or clarifying what things need to be working and tested in order to consider it done. That sounds good.
Yeah. My other thought, just in terms of how we migrate this stuff, is the intention to keep the existing Basal test job that sort of runs everything around until we finish all of these things, or like, I guess I'm trying to wonder like how we could switch stuff over piecemeal.
So I'd expect us to keep the Basal test job in place, but the things that the Basal test job is testing should be shrinking as we migrate over individual things to being built with Make instead. So whenever one component is done or can be handled with Make instead, we'll make that canary job blocking, promote that to a proper blocking pre-submit, and then remove the corresponding tests from the Basal configuration. That's kind of what I was expecting, at least.
Okay. Cool. That's, I think, yeah. I think the thing I'm just trying to imagine, the thing that like most annoys me these days right now with Basal is how I basically have to wait for it to recompile proto to run some tests that make sure my YAML is syntactically valid, or that it has the right fields and stuff. So there's a part of me that's hoping like getting the Go stuff landed, since most of the tests that do this are written in Go, might give me some amount of speed up, but I'm still gonna have to wait the 20 or however many minutes it takes to run the Basal job before my PR will actually merge. Okay, but I understand why that's reasonable.
Yeah, and there's going to be pros and cons. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a different opinion. My plan is to actually migrate everything over at once instead of scoping down, because I'm not quite sure how feasible it is to peel out layer by layer. Depends on the familiarity we have and expertise we have on Basal. I think it might be easier to just remove it at once. And also, I don't think removing any individual component would reduce the time it used for build Basal, because I think most of the time you spend is actually downloading workspace. It's not really any of the individual tests.
That's not quite correct, actually. It spends about 1/3 of its time in the linter. If you just exported the linter out of the Basal job into somewhere else, it would cut the time by like 4 minutes or something.
Are you sure? I feel like it's just the overall status for everything under test, even though it claims it's running linter, but it actually is everything. But I'm not entirely sure.
I'm reasonably sure insofar as that back then, when we added it, it increased the time by like 4 minutes. I don't know if it changed in the meantime, but
I see
what it was.
That
Which
being
link-
said, I actually forgot to add the issue of linter. Yeah, I will create a linter issue.
And just to clarify, which linter are you talking about? Because I feel like we run the Python linter and the Go linter and the YAML linter.
I was referring to the Golang CI lint.
Okay. Is there an intent to land this like by in a certain time frame? Is this the sort of thing I should say we're committing to for the 123 cycle, or is this more of a when we'll get there when we get there? We just don't know when.
I think that depends on a lot on whether or not we're trying to do a single switch. I'm kind of curious more about why the motivation behind doing a single switch. It sounds like that was because it seems like there's a perception that it'll be difficult to remove things from Basal. It's just what I was imagining that we just delete the Basal test targets. Do you think there's more to it than that?
I think if we just delete one of them, hack update Basal might not be happy because it likes to generate everything. So I'm not quite sure how we can do that. Because currently the single Basal test is Basal test //3 dots. That means Basal test everything. So if these two, so if we can make update Basal.sh happy by removing some Basal target, then I'm totally fine with that. I'm just not sure how that would work.
That only manages the Basal rules for Go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we could.
Not
What else,
really,
Ben?
not just Go, right?
It also generates these like rules for source, like groups of source files. If you're doing ... you can just add like ... minus some other target, and it will only include targets that were either under the wild card and not removed, or are a requirement of one of the remaining targets. Like you're still going to have transitive dependencies, but you can it uses set rules, so you can start with the world and then subtract things.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and another way we might be able to do it is by tagging certain targets with a tag that indicates that we don't care about it anymore, and then excluding those targets via the tag.
If you tag targets as manual, they are only going to run as a dependency of something else, or if you explicitly include that one, they won't be caught by wildcards. We've done this in Kubernetes before. It's pretty easy to do, and there's also pretty decent tooling to like auto insert this for like generated rules as like a post-processing step.
That's cool to know. Then yeah, I'm totally fine with this approach.
I don't think
if we could do it all.
Sorry, go ahead, Cole.
I was just gonna say, if we could do it all at once, that would be great. But I think that it's going to be easier and safer and probably better all around if we can do it incrementally.
I don't necessarily think it's going to improve time a lot. It remains to be seen. But just not having two different ways something can fail will be nice. Like, and have confidence that we are actually running things with the new way. I think we should I don't think it makes sense to we're clearly not going to implement this in one shot. It's going to take some iteration, and I think it makes sense to, once something exists and we're confident it works, switch to running that and pre-submit, and then that's a good enough reason to stop running it under Basal, so that you're not running it twice. We had a lot of headache. Like, one of our main motivations for removing Basal from Kubernetes just was that we already did have to do everything twice because we never had the full release on Basal. And just having everything work two different ways for building and testing and whatnot is that's bad enough on its own. Like, that's worth removing just for its own sake, regardless of pre-submit time.
And we've been talking about reducing pre-submit time and how reducing the size of the Basal job will help that, which is great. But also, that's not really the goal. Like, once we're done with this, the Basal job will be gone altogether. So In the meantime, if the Basal job still takes the same amount of time that it does, I don't think that's really that big of a deal.
Okay. I don't know that I have anything else to add to this conversation other than like I will totally help out where I can. It might mean fewer images. I've kind of held off on migrating some of the Basal related images over to community infrastructure, so maybe there'll be one less image for me to migrate. And I can probably help in the areas that involve like Python and Bash and maybe some of the post submits, just to stay out of the way of the Go stuff. The thing where I feel like least capable of helping is probably the manipulating prowl clusters without Basal. I feel like there's kind of this big tangled mess around like generating a prowl release that's made out of a bunch of different components and all sorts of stuff. The complexity there kind of eludes me versus like at the moment over in Kate's Infra, like we're managing our prowl build clusters is just like, it's just a set of YAML files. I don't have to worry too much. I just like use the generic auto bumper tool that y'all maintain to bump the images. But I don't know if like all of that component stuff that I see inside of the prowl stuff sort of defines like what all of the images are and how they should be updated and things like that.
There's two halves to the Basal magic there. One half is the publishing and the other half is the deploying. So all the component things you've seen, that's the deploying, but there's similar rules for releasing the images as well. And it is a very confusing mess in there. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that confuses me is why deploying isn't just like a kubectl apply, but I haven't looked too deeply into it.
That is what it should be.
Okay.
It's kubectl apply and a for loop for each cluster.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Maybe some of the ways we've been doing stuff over in Kate's Infra, I can help. They're not amazing or fancy, but maybe I can share some of that over here. I am excited about this. I was really tempted to start breaking some of the other pieces of this repo out into their own repos so that I didn't have to deal with Basal for them. But I'm fine working to chip away at Basal in this repo.
Yeah, I mean, in the very long term, it would be nice to have power in its own repo, and that's likely a lot easier once we do not use Basal anymore. So maybe we can think about it after this is done.
Yeah. I mean, the other like tangled mess is I wonder if it's too hard to get prowl into its own repo. Like, does it make sense to get the config directory into its own repo? Because sometimes I feel like when I'm looking at diffs for the repo, like to figure out, my most recent example is I'm trying to figure out why a job is failing. And it could be that the image that's running the job changed. So then I go look at the autobump PR and I click on the link that says, well, here's the from and to commit that includes all the changes that could have landed in the image. And I click in that and it's like 50 job config changes and then like one change down in the image directory. And I have to manually scan through the list of all those PRs and hope somebody did a like good enough commit message for me to notice that. Where like if the config changes were in their own repo, then I probably have a much easier time of seeing the actual like code changes or image related changes that matter more to me. But I think I'm kind of blurring scope here.
That should be pretty easy to do once we decouple building from resolving the images we're deploying. Like once there's no Basal magic in the deployments, I don't see any reason we couldn't move the config. I think the last thing would just be you would need to make sure you wire up running the linter across the repos.
Yeah, which Basal magic are you referring to? Because I think we could probably do that now.
I think we're still doing in Basal the whole like get a actually pinned image based on the reproducible build.
I don't think we're doing that anymore. Now that we're
Okay.
using the auto bumper, I think we were just bumping to that exact image. If you're talking about previously, like instead of an image tag, we had like the full SHA for the image was what
yeah,
what
we
actually
used
got
like like rules Kates and Basal would like resolve it to the full like pinned
Yeah, I
digit.
don't believe we're doing that anymore.
Okay. I'll follow up separately about it. Unrelated thing that like we should still be able to pin those and probably should.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, at the moment, I just feel like it's probably easier to just focus on this work rather than shuffling repos around and stuff. But if it suddenly makes a lot of sense to me, I will open up an issue and bring it up. Any other questions or comments on this?
I have a question. Hey, Cole. It sounds like, if what I'm hearing correctly, y'all have this done and figured out. Do you need other people to help with this? Like especially experienced?
Yes.
I think we should put a note out to KDev of your intentions and ask for help, because I think you'll get it.
Okay.
I'm also happy to do other
Yeah.
outreach, targeted outreach for you, especially if you have like a targeted profile that you're looking for, meaning like engineer has to know Basal, has to know prowl, and we can do some targeted outreach for you. So whatever you need there, we can talk offline and I'll get you cooking with some folks.
Cool. Yeah, I think that could be particularly useful for the TypeScript stuff. There's a couple of things where I think we just don't have that much expertise anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be helpful.
Yeah, I'll work with you. I'll DM you in a bit.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for chatting about that. Like I said, really excited about this. I'm literally right now adding a topic to the agenda because it just occurred to me. And I think it's more just to raise visibility on it than anything. Let me share my screen. Window. Let me share a window instead. I think I'm sharing a window. It's this. BOSCOS right now uses API extensions v1 beta 1 to define its CRDs. And as of Kubernetes 122, that goes away. So I copy pasted sort of the notes from the deprecation guide. And then I literally just did the lowest effort PR where I made those changes to the CRD resource, and Jeff and Alvaro rightly pointed out that like, well, it doesn't work right now. And we are gonna have some questions around the upgrade story and stuff. So as I find the time, I was gonna go through the BOSCOS example deployment and see what the upgrade story looks like there for this resource. But I just wanted to like raise the visibility on this because at the moment, for the Kates Infra prowl clusters, we are running in GKE's release channels, which means our clusters just automatically get upgraded to a newer version. We're currently sitting on Kubernetes 120, and I feel like 121 is going to happen very soon. which makes me feel like we are going to have to address this before the end of the year, or our BOSCOS deployments might break. So I view this as like, it's really important. It's not urgent right now, but I feel like as soon as 121 rolls out, it's going to be urgent, because I don't want to, like, ideally I'd like to avoid having to pin our cluster to a numbered version. I'd rather get our cluster able to upgrade to Kubernetes 122 when that is ready and stable and production ready and stuff. If anybody has more BOSCOS experience and more time than me, I would probably appreciate your help on this. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
I have a couple of questions about this. So actually, I'm not sure if versioning would help in this case, or is it desired? I think the reason why you cannot just kubectl apply is because of they're the same version of CRD and you cannot patch it.
Okay.
The other thing is I'm not sure how you notice this, and is there a formal way to know that someone is using deprecated API somewhere? And so, for example, if I manage a prowl instance, or if I manage a build cluster that use BOSCOS, because all of the deployment are automated, so the deploy job will always succeed, even though there's a warning. So if I never pay attention to the build log, that means it's going to break when v1.22 is released. Just a general question of how do you think we should monitor, or
let's see, can you see my, let's see, yes, you can see my window. I can tell you how we're doing it right now for K-Infra stuff. So we're just kind of still, I think, in the very early prototype stages with a tool called Contest, which basically relies on open policy agent definitions. So open policy agent is a thing where you can write policies in its language called Rego, which I forget what that's a derivative of or inspired by. But the idea is it allows you to sort of define policies against structured data such as YAML files, Kubernetes manifests, Terraform resources, things like that. And so we basically have some people who sort of keep track of the release notes, especially like check out this page, the API deprecation guide. Every time there is a release of Kubernetes, this gets updated. And then we have people, it's usually Arnaud, but I believe there have been some other folks who contributed to this, write a policy that says like, hey, this thing is deprecated and you should use this instead. And you're like, we're doing the same thing where it's a warning right now. But the idea is like, if I really cared a whole bunch, I could turn one of these into and I think it's an error instead of a warn, and it would start blocking our precedents. There are tools out there, like I think I literally just heard of one today. There are other tools out there that might have like other people maintaining other rules. I kind of like that we're using open policy agent just for our stuff, just for the things that we care about. But the short version of that answer is we pay attention to the Kubernetes release notes, we look for deprecations, and then we add tooling that warns about those deprecations. And make sure that we have like a PR-based audit process that sort of lets us know when our clusters are upgrading from one version to another. And based on that. That's how I'm going to know when our cluster hits 121 and when I'm going to start jumping up and down and saying, like, we got to fix BOSCOS real bad. Does that answer your question?
That's awesome. Yeah, it does. I feel like this is a generally helpful tool that other repo might also benefit from.
Sure.
Because maintaining that list is not it should not be a duplicated work, right? If someone is already inspecting the release notes, why should someone else also need to do the same thing?
I agree with you, and that's why I'm like, I guarantee, like, whatever we're doing for K10 we're probably duplicating like 10 other tools that people in the ecosystem have already written to do this sort of stuff. I think for us, it's a learning experience to use Open Policy Agent a little bit better, or just at all. I'm gonna stop my share. The dream I have with Open Policy Agent, it's the sort of thing where you can define your policies once, and then there's like a webhook admission controller, essentially, where you can apply those policies to deny resources hitting your cluster at deploy time, but you could use a tool like ConfTest to apply those same policies at like build time, merge time, whatever. So I've always liked the idea where, like, we run a bunch of static analysis against our job configs, for example. It's a bunch of Go unit tests, but then we don't take all of that wonderful analysis and like prevent jobs that would fail those tests from actually landing in the cluster. We're just sort of trusting that the humans who can manually create prowl jobs or could manually apply configs to the prowl cluster aren't going to do that, or they're going to make sure they've run like statically verified configs. And I think doing something like Open Policy Agent, which sort of has the tooling and infrastructure, just plug in policies here and here, would let us, I don't know, handle it at both places for redundancy's sake. But yes, I agree. If like, I'm happy to share our deprecation policy stuff, but I'm sure if we did some looking around, we could find something that somebody else has maintained and is far more fully featured than just the list of API deprecations for tracking.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Paris, over to you.
Hey, y'all. I am here for meta reasons. I serve on the governing board for Kubernetes I'm a Kubernetes representative on the governing board, and the governing board deals with money and other fun operational activities like that. So what I'm doing is trying to get SIG needs lined up for staffing, especially long-term staffing. So I wanted to hear from the group to see if there were any sub-projects, especially long-term, that we fear need more folks. Not talking about interns, I'm talking about engineering resources, whether that's with service providers, whether that's with end users, whatever it is, we need to start getting the needs together so that we can communicate our needs to these folks, especially from a long-term perspective. So I'm curious to hear from the group as far as like what y'all think the health of your sub-projects are as far as activity and people, and just how we can pretty much formulate a plan. I mean, are y'all planning on doing this forever? Like, who are you, or like, are y'all training people behind you to come up into reviewer and approver spots, especially sub-project ownership? How can we help?
That's a pretty wide set of topics.
Yep. And I'm happy to leave it at that too, if you want to think about it. So like I'm happy to drop that and run away. But yeah, meet with governing board next week on site at KubeCon, and we really start to dig into some of these ideas. Obviously, other people are going to be talking about other CNCF projects and staffing. I'm concerned about Kubernetes and staffing for Kubernetes. So that's where I come in. I'm most concerned about that. And I want to make sure that y'all are healthy and fruitful in your endeavors forever.
I'm being quiet on purpose because Paris and I had talked offline.
I really think y'all need an onboarding program. Sorry to cut you off, Aaron. I think y'all need an onboarding program, and I think we need a person to do that. I think y'all are super busy with the stuff on your plates right now. But I think getting more documentation, more onboarding together to onboard more engineers into the group would be super fruitful and helpful. Sorry, Aaron, that was in my head that I wanted to finish too.
So there's a part of me that thinks that the removal of Basal will help tremendously, because I think any like first-time contributor to the project who comes to this repo and is like, what is this Basal stuff, bounces away pretty quickly. I feel like historically, we've had a problem with people not believing that they can take ownership or contribute to any of the test infrastructure. If it's because they believe that we've got this, it's okay, that is factually incorrect. I have a list, I have hundreds of issues right now that describe how things are broken or too painful or could be better. And I could point people at any of these, but they all feel like big and murky. Like, will the project blow up tomorrow if none of these things are addressed? No. Will it crumble over time and be harder and harder to contribute to? Maybe. Like, so I have personal opinions on that stuff, but I think just like lowering the barrier to entry, like I'd love a new contributor onboarding thing not to have to include the word Basal. If it's just like use go test like you are used to everywhere else, or run make test or make build, whatever, like that, hopefully simplify things a lot. I also, the other like trickier policy thing that I have a problem with is we as a project waste a ton of money on our tests, or we waste a ton of resources, I guess. And so like money is one measure of that, and time is another measure of that. Like it's just like whatever, it doesn't cost actual money, it just costs us our time, but we'll just wait. I feel like it's unfair to contributors. Now that the community is having to pay for tests, I can say with confidence that like we can't afford to pay for all of the tests that the project currently runs across all the repos. We just can't. We got to figure out what to do about that. I don't know how to ask for help with that though. Like I certainly can't hand that off to a new contributor. I need help from like people who have knowledge of Kubernetes and the project as a whole and where the coverage gaps are and stuff.
Well, that's what
so I probably need those people's time.
Interrupt you. Take new contributor off the table. I want you to take that. I want you to erase that word, and I want you to focus on engineers who have Kubernetes experience, who will start to contribute based on their employers telling them that they can and should. So like, let's take like the idea of people coming to you with no experience in Kubernetes and or Go, like put that off to the side. Let's talk about experienced professionals who can be sent here to grow into maintainer roles.
That's fair. I think for the specific problem Aaron's talking about, though, we kind of need people that are experienced in the project now to help identify, like, what should we continue to run versus what should we drop.
But okay, let me go back to something that's a little less project specific. The other problem I've just been experiencing the pain lately. It's too hard to figure out what changed. It's way too hard to answer that question because what changed could be this repo, one of three other repos. It could be the image. Then I got to figure out what changed inside of the image. It could be the infrastructure underneath. And like answering all of those questions requires a different set of steps that usually involves a lot of clicking and copying and pasting and maybe manually writing some tooling or scripts to go investigate things because, like, for example, we don't have a quick way to go say, tell me the pass or failure status of all the pre-submits that ran against the release 122 branch of Kubernetes. We just don't. There are all sorts of problems like that that would reduce the pain of troubleshooting if they were solved. But again, if they're not solved, the troubleshooting will just be like what it is now, which is that there are a few like technically deep people across the project who can do the troubleshooting. But when they go away, I don't know who will be able to replace them. There, I said I wasn't going to talk, and I did. I got to stop that.
Yeah, that was good. Yep, I already have that. Y'all need folks that, and you can't train or mentor. You need people who know Kubernetes, and you also need people who have already contributed to the project or active contributors currently. Okay, and then what about like?
For those problems, I think there's probably other things that can be done without having, like, for example, if you want to help us build the Typescript stuff without Basal, I don't think you need to know anything about Kubernetes at all.
Yeah, literally this like make it work without Basal stuff. I'm hoping that a lot of it could be done by somebody who's like, they know build and test stuff pretty well, but they don't have a ton of project experience. As long as we can give them a like, well, this is the command you run to see if it works. Just keep running that command over and over until it works. That's a helpful way to get people with less. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there may be two things we should separate. The one is we have like a concrete kind of project right here with the Basal and the Basal removal, and the other thing Paris mentioned is finding people that become maintainers.
Yes.
And the second thing is an entirely separate bag, I think. And I would say the main issue with that is that, at least for prowl, that it isn't really a project. It's something that's used by a couple of people that's today relatively complicated to set up, understand, and everything. And unless you're getting paid to do this, you don't really have much motivation to stick with it or much reason. And there are just very few people that work in this area.
Looks like more projects use prowl though. Doesn't seem like just a little bit of people that use prowl. Like EKS is running prowl, OpenShift.
Sure, but if they're getting paid to actually run it, I think that falls in that category that like then it might make sense to stick with it. But as someone that's maybe just has like an interest in Kubernetes or something, it's going to be difficult to keep up with unless you actually have a good reason to be trying to deal with prowl day to day, as opposed to like whatever CI stack you actually use at work.
Right. So like,
yeah, and also for most of these other users, there is little to no contribution back to the project. I cannot say why, but this is how it is today. Maybe we could try to figure out why this is happening. Maybe they're just happy and don't want anything to ever change, or maybe other reasons, I don't know.
The rumor
Yeah.
is that Google and Microsoft, Google and Red Hat have this SIG taken care of, you see. And that is clearly not correct, but I really do think that it has a lot to do with the fact that you don't have an onboarding program. So a lot of folks have come to this meeting thinking that you all have it taken care of. And that is incorrect. So that's why I think one of the highest priorities for this group is to get an onboarding program together, so that people can feel like they can jump in and start outside of just like help wanted issues. But I mean, as far as like growing maintainers, I mean, that's like the perfect, Prow is the perfect example, because y'all, like only a few of y'all take care of that. So do you all think that you're going to take care of it in 3 years? Like, do you see yourselves as Prow maintainers in 3 years? And if not, then like, let's talk about how we can talk to these other 24 projects about growing maintainers for Prow. And like talk to them directly about how we need Proud maintainers to grow. I mean, obviously it's going to take 6 months to grow people into maintainer plus roles. So that's why I'm thinking ahead and thinking long-term right now, and not necessarily short-term, like a help wanted issue.
So I have another gap that's, I think, pretty uncovered by most people here. Not everybody. The testing commons sub-project, we ended up kind of retiring or just kind of like putting into maintenance mode. To my knowledge, there's nobody who really like has ownership or oversight over good, rigorous testing practices for the Kubernetes repo. It's always been this issue where like we as a group are not in charge of writing your tests for you. We just want to make sure that they are effective and actionable. But there's nobody here who really has or is willing to claim ownership of the E2E framework that lives inside of Kubernetes. There are a group of people who are working on an E2E framework that is outside of Kubernetes. I think there's some collaboration between some people from VMware and Apple and Amazon on Kubernetes SIG's E2E framework, but there are zero plans to fold that back into Kubernetes. As a result, Kubernetes like E2E tests are like really painful and difficult to read and write. We had Ansi come by a little while ago to talk about like, what if we used Ginkgo v2? And that might solve some part of it, but it definitely won't solve the problem of like, people have copy pasted a lot of stuff and I have no idea which parts of it are good or bad as far as patterns for like doing a thing to a cluster and then waiting to see if that thing had an effect and then doing another thing based on that. And the tests are a mess and nobody is in charge of cleaning them up. It's a tragedy of the commons situation where like perhaps it really is good enough and we really are okay with the current situation where each SIG is responsible for its own set of end-to-end tests, and then everybody kind of organically nudges along the end-to-end testing framework just to meet their needs. But there's no like stewardship of the framework and there's no real vision. It's just everybody's kind of hoping that it doesn't break too badly. And nobody's working to like simplify it or make it any easier to write more tests. And like, there will always be more tests that have to be written for Kubernetes as Kubernetes grows. But perhaps the cost of like learning how to write these new painful tests and stuff is a cost that people are willing to pay, as opposed to investing in making it easier to write more tests for simpler coverage and stuff. Again, this kind of goes back to like, I feel like the project is over-reliant on end-to-end tests that are slow and flaky. And why aren't we, enforcing more of a discipline of like more reliable unit tests and integration tests and stuff? Nobody's working on that.
Yeah, exactly. Like think big. Like that's exactly what I challenge all to do right now, is to like think big like that. And like, how can we get folks to help with that big thought stuff, right? I'm I'm down with your thoughts, Aaron. That's, I guess, TLDR. I mean, and I guess I challenge y'all to, as maintainers, to think about what I said with it, which is like, where do y'all want to be with the project as maintainers, reviewers, approvers, sub-project owners? That's what I'd label a maintainer. In 3 years, like, do you all want to continue to do this in 3 years? If not, like, let's think about how we're going to take care of the stuff that you work on right now. But that was it. I would love, yeah, DM me with any thoughts that you have. Chairs, I'll reach out to y'all separately anyway. But let's get to thinking.
Cool. And that ding means we're at time. No, it means somebody received email. But we are out of time. Thank you all for showing up today. And I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks at our next SIG testing bi-weekly meeting. Have a happy Tuesday, everybody.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.